Hi there, my name is Shannon, and I'm Willamette Week's music and visual arts editor. I'm here today with Anders Carlson, who is a climate scientist and a glacial geologist. And earlier this year, he founded the Oregon Glacier Institute, which is dedicated to monitoring the health of Oregon's glaciers. Anders, could you sort of start off by giving us a rundown of why you founded the Institute? Why was this necessary?
Um, the, the basic was what was a real spark. My co-founder and I, Aaron Hartz, we've been kicking around ideas for several years about working on Oregon's glaciers and investigating their health, their change. And what was a real impetus was the funerals that were held for the glaciers in Switzerland and Iceland last year. We were like, wait a second. So that was about almost exactly a year ago, late September. I think they did it in August, late September. And we're like, that's happening here in the US and that's happening here in Oregon. And we know that. We wrote a short op-ed on that idea for the Oregonian, stating we thought X number of glaciers were gone in Oregon. And they said, well, you don't really have the evidence for that. So we turned around and went out to prove it. And in May we were like, well, we'd written several other op-eds and had some discussions with people within the state government about along the lines of monitoring glacier change in Oregon, and it wasn't really getting anywhere. So we thought, well, let's just, if nobody else is doing it, we got to do it, because we think it's important enough to be raising awareness on this and writing about it, talking to people. We might as well just, shit or get off the pot. And so we stayed there. We went for it. And it's the thing that was kind of stunning to us was that how few people, it seems, in Oregon know we have glaciers, for one, and or if they do, they're just pretty little things up in the high mountains and far removed from Portland or Eugene or from Bend. I mean, Bend is closer to them, but and so there's kind of like this otherness to them, and they're just a separate thing, rather than they're actually a vital, important part of our state's economies and also our state identity. And that will fundamentally change if or when these glaciers disappear. And our goal then is to raise awareness that these exist, raise people's concern about their disappearance, and hopefully try to, at a local scale, measure the change and document that change, measure and document the change that allows us to project their future. And then at a much larger scale, to combat their disappearance, we need to change how we use carbon. And that's a global problem, but we can also lead as a state as being a good example, like by passing the cap and trade bill. So, yeah.
Because glaciers, they also play like a role in like our ecosystem and our waterways too, right? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, definitely. They are the headwaters of our major rivers in the Northwest Oregon. The McKenzie, the Sandy, the Willamette then feeds into that. The Deschutes, those rivers are all glacial fed at their sources. And so by the time we get to like right now, and October and September, I guess we're in October still, the snowpack's long gone. And at this point, the only source water to these rivers is either groundwater, which can also come from the glaciers too, and then the glacier melt themselves. And so their glacier, one way, the technical definition of the glacier is ice that moves under its own weight, so it deforms. But the other way to look at it is it's a persistent for many decades snowpack that sticks around throughout the year. So that then turns into ice, and so that ice there is the last source of water we have come the late summer, early fall. And that water, the most direct effect, it keeps the streams cool. So it allows salmon and trout to spawn. They don't like hot streams, and the streams will get warmer when that water disappears. The ranchers and farmers use that water to irrigate their crops because the streams are running dry. So you're pulling it out of they would otherwise run dry, and so now you're using the glacial meltwater. The hydro dams, the three largest hydroelectric dams, all within Oregon, so not on the Snake or the Columbia River, are all glacial meltwater fed. And so ironic, we need the hydroelectric power as a good, it's got its issues with salmon migration and affecting streams. And so it's not a perfect solution, but it's not a carbon source either. Or at least it was when we built it without a cement, but it's not burning fossil fuels. Logging is based on being able to grow these trees and not have them burn so frequently. And so you want those glaciers there to help you maintain these the forest plantations as well. So it's, and then on top of that, we have our winter sports economy, which is almost $1 billion a year. And we, the snowpack that we use for skiing and snowboarding and is a yearly phenomenon that's heavily controlled by natural events. But the glaciers are telling you your long-term trend. And so you have this thing where you're going back and forth, this noisy record, low snow year, high snow year. And that can be, the natural variability in that can be hiding a long-term trend. And the glaciers are showing you, because they are the snowpack that just happens to stick around for year after year after year. If they're retreating, our snowpack's not doing well either. And so they're kind of like the harbinger of bad things to come. So we're tightly tied to our glaciers, and it's we need to realize that, and then try to protect them, and also at least try to figure out when they'll disappear so we can adjust accordingly.
Right. So my understanding is there's no oversight agencies that monitor the health of glaciers. So now that you guys exist, what are you actually physically doing to go check on these glaciers?
We've just completed this summer doing the first count of how many glaciers remain in Oregon, after the last time that was done was 70 years ago when the USGS made its topographic map series, and in the subsequent 70 years, they never updated it. We did the count. Next year, we want to go out and assess then kind of the actual extent of the remaining glaciers. So this year we went around just kind of with a binary approach of, is it still an ice glacier, active glacier or not? Is it dead or alive? And next year determine what is really still around, and how big are they? How close to switching over into a dead zone are they? Dead column. And at that point too, then we want to set up a mass balance monitoring program. And this is measuring the ins and outs of glaciers. And this is the yearly impact of the yearly weather, you could say, to then look at how the weather then determines the longer term response of the glacier. So the climate change that the glacier records versus the yearly weather. And that's measuring how much snow goes into a given glacier, and making measurements in May, and then how much ice melted into summer. So going back out there in September, October, late September, mid-October, up to mid-October, before the first snowfall is. And you conduct that year in and year out, and you can then measure how much is the ice melting, how much is it snowing, and so it's basically how much is it's doing a calorie count of your glacier. You got your watch, you measure your output, input, that's all you're doing that. And then the long-term response of the glacier is, did you gain or lose weight? And so you may have a crash diet one year, like 2015 was a really bad snow year. And that could have been like, I'm going to fast for a week. And yeah, of course you lose a lot of water weight, but over time, a good healthy person would be, watching their weight change. And that's what the long-term response of the glacier is. So it's changing area and length, but then we're measuring how much it's eating, how much it's expending calories when it melts, is another way to do it. And that kind of program, once you have that set up, that's something that should run in perpetuity till the glacier is gone. And it's crucial data. It's incremental data, but you then determine the long-term health of the glacier, and from that, knowing its relationship to temperature, summer temperatures, or winter snowfall, you can then model the future of all the glaciers in Oregon from these observations on a select few. So that's our goal, is to set up that kind of monitoring program.
So you mentioned the funeral that you held for Clark Glacier, and also the count that you did this summer. How many glaciers do we have here now?
we're going to hold off on releasing that just yet, because we're working with the Forest Service, and with the fires happening, they've gotten a little slow in responding to them okaying us coming forward with this kind of information. But Clark is one of many that have disappeared. I'll say it like that.
Well, so if you can't give me an exact number, how bad are things for glaciers right now in a general sense?
Less than 50%, but more than 25%, let's say, are gone.
Well, those are all my questions, unless you have anything that you want to add or ask or clarify.
Um, I think like there's the loss of I think the loss of these glaciers in Oregon. We have a blessing of being where we are, that our coasts are steep. So sea level rise, while it's an issue, it's not a major issue. Like we're not going to drown out like is happening in Florida. We don't have subway systems to begin with, but like, New York subways will be underwater. Um, we're not in California yet. So our fires, we have bad fires in Southern Oregon, but our burns here are not this persistent, long-term, every year mega fire burning like we see in California. Our heat waves are still bad, but they're not as bad as they could be. And the glacier retreat and our loss of our snowpack, though, that it's signaling is going to be, I think, is our indicator of global warming's impact on Oregon. And that, if you want to, that change is showing that we are being impacted, and that will affect our economies. It will affect our lifestyle. It will affect our identities. Looking out from Portland instead of seeing or from Eugene or Corvallis or Bend, instead of seeing white snow-covered mountains, we'll see black peaks. And that's just not what we signed up for when we moved here. Or we're born here, and what we love if we're natives. I'm not a native, but and that loss is going to be profound.